The downstairs neighbour heard it before he knew what it was. A loud boom, and then another, then 3 more in quick succession. It was like furniture being hurled or something heavier, and then there was silence, followed by loud music. That's when the neighbour heard Kain Tailby screaming, "Don't do this, wake up, wake up." The neighbour had been on the verge of calling for help, but now, heart pounding in his chest, he stepped outside with his phone in his hand. But he didn't need to dial. An ambulance was already turning onto Green Hill Lane. By the way, this is Dark Case, and you can call me Jack. I bring you true crime documentaries and other things that you may later regret knowing. Please do join the amazingly supportive Dark Case family by hitting subscribe now and making sure that you have all notifications turned on. Just a reminder that the Dark Case merch store is now open, so you can pick up a cool little coffee mug or a t-shirt. That is, if you ever want to be an extra cool person. And today's silly little question: what is the best flavour of crisps, or for my American viewers, chips? Comment down below, I'm excited to see which flavour wins. All Patreon or channel membership support goes a really long way, and I can't thank you all enough. But of course, I do thank you deeply. And now, on with the video. Chrissie Everett-Hickson was only 21. She was vibrant, funny, open-hearted. The kind of young woman whose laugh made others laugh, whose energy was pretty magnetic. Her mother Dawn called her innocent, truly beautiful, compassionate, compelling. She also had 3 sisters who adored her, a father who called her his little miracle, as she was born despite doctors saying that he would never be able to have children after he was in a serious road accident. Chrissy was the youngest of all the siblings. She was the soft-hearted one, and she didn't go looking for trouble at all. In fact, she saw the best in people, and sometimes even when it wasn't really deserved. Chrissy worked as a baker, but she was just beginning to dream big. Her family said that she wanted to travel, that she wanted to start her own business one day, and maybe have kids. She had signed up to the organ donor registry without ever mentioning it to anyone. This was the kind of compassion that she was known for, but no act of kindness could protect her from what would happen that night, especially not in the one place that she should have felt safe. On February the 17th, 2024, Chrissy and her boyfriend, 31-year-old Kain Tailby, were planning to celebrate 1 year together. It was nothing fancy, just a trip into Derby, where they would see a film and have a couple of drinks. But Kain was already in a bad mood. This was something which he blamed on a cat. "One of them is a bit temperamental with me," he said. "She went through one of the hate phases and it aggravated me." And to make the evening unravel even further, the couple boarded the wrong bus, a bus that didn't actually go to Derby. This made Kain more irritated. So instead of going to the cinema, the couple picked up a few cans of beer and then headed back towards Riddings. They stopped at a pub along the way and had a couple of drinks, and then they walked the rest of the way home. It was pretty late when they got back to their flat on Green Hill Lane, and within an hour, they started shouting. Their neighbour heard it all. In fact, it was loud enough that he felt he had to pause the TV. The man who lived below Chrissy and Kain had grown used to the sounds of young people living upstairs. There was laughter, footsteps, and sometimes music too. But that night, something felt wrong. The raised voices started shortly after midnight, and then the muffled shouting escalated into something sharper, and this was followed suddenly by 5 or 6 hard thudding noises. They weren't the kind of bangs that came from dropping something. These were deliberate, repetitive, and almost measured. The neighbour stepped out of his flat, concerned, and he hovered in the stairwell. Then he heard something which made him grow even more suspicious. Music started playing, and it was very loud. He thought it was as if someone was trying to cover up the silence. Then came a noise from a nightmare. It was a gurgling, followed by a man shouting, "Wake up, wake up, don't do this to me." The neighbour sent a text message to a friend saying, "I'm seriously concerned." He was about to call emergency services, but he wouldn't get the chance. The approaching flashing blue lights beat him to it. An ambulance had already been dispatched, and that's because Kain Tailby had already picked up the phone. But when Kain's call connected, this story would only get worse. In the 999 call, Kain's tone wavered between panic and control. He said that Chrissy was in the bath and that red was leaking from her ear. He said he'd been trying to clean her up. But the story he gave, the one he clung to, was that this was all Chrissy's fault.
Literally just, oh, she got pushy shovey, you saw pushy shoving me around, I've retaliated, and obviously I'm a bit bigger than what she is, and it's just kind of escalated from there.
When police arrived, they found Chrissy unconscious in a bath. She was now completely unresponsive. The water she was found in was now a translucent crimson. She was rushed to the nearest hospital. Doctors could immediately tell that this was no accident. There were skull fractures, bruising was found on the neck, and there was a traumatic brain injury so severe that her brain had begun to swell, pushing against the confines of her skull. The prognosis was grim from the start. Chrissy was placed on life support, and although her body did hold on, she never regained consciousness. 5 days later, on February the 23rd, at 12:39 a.m, her time on this earth came to an end.
Need hand up, you alright?
He's just pulled me a bit.
Yep. Yep. You alright, mate, yeah?
The only thing that passed is you took my laces.
From the moment that Kain Tailby was taken into custody, the truth was slippery. At first he told police that Chrissy had slapped him. "How did that make you feel?" one officer asked. "Angry," he said. Really angry. He claimed that he shouted at her, pinning her to the floor, and that he banged her head once. When police mentioned the neighbour had heard 5 or 6 loud bangs, his story shifted. He now admitted that he may have slammed her head 5 or 6 times. He also now described using both hands to push on her neck, lifting her head off the floor, and then slamming it back down with force. He said he remembered the noise that it made, and he saw that her eyes were closed. He said he heard her groan, and then saw the red beginning to leak. However, he kept going. When asked why, he simply couldn't explain it. Instead, he pointed again to the cat, to the bus that went the wrong way, to the beers that they had drank, in fact, to everything but himself. Despite repeated interviews, one thing never reared its head, and that was a motive. There wasn't even really an attempt at one. All we got were flashes of temper, combined with irreversible consequences. The trial at Derby Crown Court unfolded across a week and a half. The prosecution, led by Mary Pryor Casey, laid out the timeline with painful clarity. They played the 999 call. They showed images of the scene. They detailed Chrissy's injuries, the multiple skull fractures, the extensive bruising, the fact that her brain had continued to swell after the event, eventually pushing through the base of her skull, a final fact that could not be reversed. No one in her family knew that Chrissy was a registered organ donor. That was not until doctors asked the question that they never wanted to hear. And even in their grief, they knew what Chrissy would have said. And in fact, 5 people are alive today because of her choice. 5 strangers now carry pieces of Chrissy. Her mother, Dawn, later said that this knowledge did give her the smallest measure of comfort, that even now, her daughter's heart had been guided by compassion. Chrissy didn't get to live out her dreams, but she did give others the chance to live out theirs. Back in court, Kain had admitted to manslaughter, but he insisted that he never meant to cause serious harm. He tried to frame all of this simply as an overreaction in the heat of the moment, but the evidence told another story: the sustained nature of the blows, the attempt to clean her up rather than immediately getting her help that could have saved her life, the neighbour's account of multiple deliberate impacts, and of course, the bath. Why put her in the bath if it wasn't just to try and hide what had happened? "Whatever the reason for your rage that night," said Judge Sean Smith Casey, There was no justification for the violence you used, and the jury agreed. On March 26, 2025, Kain Tailby was found guilty of murder. 2 days after the verdict, the sentencing hearing began. The courtroom was silent as Chrissy's family now addressed the man who had taken Chrissy from them. Her big sisters, Abby, Kaylee, and Jenny spoke first. Words cannot begin to convey our devastating loss, they said. 4 sisters are now 3. Father Sean called Chrissy his little miracle, and that she was. He looked at Cain and said, "I've always been Mr. Fix-It to her, but I couldn't fix this." Then her mother, Dawn, stood to speak. She did something that few expected. Dawn forgave him. "I wish you well," she said softly. "You will need those well wishes to comfort your soul." Her strength stunned the room. Even the judge called her compassion beyond admirable. But he didn't mistake forgiveness for leniency. This was an explosion of anger and violence, Judge Smith told Cain. "You snuffed out the life of someone who trusted you. Why? Only you know. But the devastation you've caused is immeasurable." Kain Tailby stood in the dock as his sentence was read. Life imprisonment, with a minimum term of 16 years and 329 days before he could even be considered for release. He showed no visible reaction. His solicitor argued that he was not an evil man, a man with no prior convictions. He was a long-term bakery worker. He was a father, but none of that mattered more than what he had done. Chrissie Everett-Hickson had her whole life ahead of her. She had love, dreams, family. She had people who described her smile as infectious and her spirit as kind and considerate. She passed in terrible circumstances, in the home that she shared with the man that she loved, and on the night that they were meant to be celebrating their relationship. And while Cain may one day leave prison, Chrissy's loved ones will carry a life sentence of grief. Be careful out there, and I'll see you soon.